Morning. I'm delighted to be with you. I'm also nervous to be with you. I'm in a different church pretty much every Sunday, and I have a different congregation to look at almost every week. And so I'm a little nervous here because, well, let's just be honest. Sometimes I go to a church and I know that pastor pretty well, and I've heard him preach, and it's not really all that nervous for me to go and preach behind him. But your pastor is Pastor Gary Bully, and he's stinking good. And so I'm just going to. I'm comfortable in my own skin, but also I'm pretty self-aware. I know my skill set. So I am nervous to be here and have to fill his shoes. But what a joy to be able to do that. I am used to different types of congregations. Many times I'll go and preach at rural churches, and it's just a different animal there. You know what I mean? You never know what to expect. When I was coming here, I wanted to be prepared. I looked in my closet and I thought, I'm going to get the loudest suit that I own and try to start out, and then I put it up and put this one on instead. But anyway, but I have some different ethnic churches that I preach at, and so I enjoy being at a church. Like every church has got a different personality. Every single one has a different way that it does, different culture, and your church is no different. So I look forward to being here. You have one of the most blessed churches in the state of Georgia. I don't know if y'all realize that. I think sometimes we get caught in some of the, frustrations of things going on, but we forget how blessed we are. But you're a church that's a disciple-making machine. You guys aren't happy for someone just to kind of have a, maybe a moderately friendly relationship with Christ. You want somebody to be, gung-ho, 100% turned on to him and a genuine disciple and disciple maker. I just need you to know what a joy that is, to be around folks that have that kind of spirit, that kind of heart. You got a pastor that knows how to do it too. You're blessed to have Pastor Gary Bully. He is a genius of a man. Now, all the stuff in his head is just, it's unbelievable. The discipleship series that he's done, I'm still going over that and blown away all that was in his head. So you're blessed, and I just want you to know how grateful I am to be a part of that. I have 131 churches. I got to tell you one story. It's a true story. My wife is not well today, or she'd be with me, and she'd confirm this. We were at one of my rural churches, and their country as cow manure. And so I was there, and I preached. And what you have to do in some of these churches is when you get through preaching, you have to go to the back, and they have to all come by and shake your hand and tell you what a great job you did, even if you were, even if you really stunk, dropped an egg or whatever. So I went back there, and this one lady, and she was trying to be sophisticated, and she goes, "Oh, brother preacher Alan, I was just so happy your sermon today. I just love that suppository preaching." And my wife didn't miss a beat. She goes, "I wondered where he pulled that out of," So I'm thankful for two things that she's not with me this time, but because no telling where I'm going to pull this one. But I just want you to know that I enjoy planting churches, and I've been able to plant 31 churches in the last 5 years. Gary has been very helpful in helping me with that. 14 different language groups we have now in all of our associations. 14. That's pretty, now if you count redneck, 15. But the joy of doing this kind of thing and planting churches and going and being a part of a Ukrainian church or a Korean church or a Bhutanese Nepali church or a Farsi church in Farsi, an Iranian church, that is just an amazing thing to watch. And to watch these ethnics have baptism service, like a Haitian baptism or a Ukrainian baptism. I was in the Ukraine for 3 weeks this summer, war-torn Ukraine. I was 2 blocks away from the war. I heard with my own ears AK-47s being shot. I felt percussion grenades twice. It was a neat story. I have to come by one time and tell y'all about that story, show you pictures. Pretty cool. But wouldn't want to reproduce that. That was horrifying. But there's one thing I've started that's pretty neat that I've never done before, and that's I've planted a school. I planted a school in the part of Appalachian that's in my region. My region stretches all the way up into Jasper, Pickens County, one of the most poor counties in the state of Georgia. We started this one-room schoolhouse that's now a two-room schoolhouse, but it's the same concept of a one-room 19th century schoolhouse. Multiple grade levels from age K5 or grade K5 all the way to 11th grade. 10 grade levels all the way through. Different ages. But one thing that's in common, all these kids come from at-risk, low-income families. Every one of them. Many of them do not understand the concept of a mother or a father. They would not understand that except to read about it. Some of you are so blessed. You have no idea how blessed you are. Their house is a mobile home or a very poor home. And many of them, one of the houses I visited, they didn't have running water. They have a big bucket with cat litter in it. And that's their bathroom. And they change that every week. Pretty amazing how different our world is, isn't it? So we have these students, and they don't pay tuition. It's totally completely free because their parents couldn't afford to put them in there, and they would never put them in there if they had to pay anything anyway. Many of these parents, I say parents, they're really guardians. They're grandparents. We have one girl who's living with her great-grandmother because both her mother and her grandmother are in jail right now. So she's having to live with her great-grandmother. It's amazing. But I'd like for you to just see a little taste of what ministry we've started with this school, trying to take these kids that are in a horrible world and give them a little taste of reality in a Christian school setting in Pickens, Georgia. Would you run that tape?
A new day is beginning on the Double H Ranch in rural North Georgia. For years, this place was home to the cowboy kids, young men and women who came to find hope and healing through horsemanship, dance, and old-fashioned hard work. But as time went on, it became clear that a critical need still wasn't being met.
My first group of kids, I realized, were graduating from high school. They couldn't read, they couldn't write, they couldn't spell. They did not have the tools to make it in the world.
And so the red-roofed house was transformed into a full-time, two-room schoolhouse providing Christ-centered education. Its name?
The Academy at Double H Ranch.
Academy at Double H Ranch.
The Academy at Double H Ranch.
I go to school at the Academy at Double H Ranch.
But what exactly goes on inside the academy?
Well, it's a Christian-based school. We have Bible classes in the morning and one in the evening. Our whole curriculum is around God and how He works and how we're created. And
I do science.
My favorite thing is doing Bible. We have to be careful about theirs.
We read our Bibles and we talk to God a lot.
We learn, some would say we learn about food here.
We learn about food. She teaches me about the numbers on the letters and what sounds they make.
And learning isn't limited just to the classroom. Once a week, students move outside for some very special classes.
On Fridays, we have a non-traditional schooling, and it's called Fabulous Friday, and we get to have chapel, and we go in the garden. And at the end, we get to learn about teamwork with the horses.
I'm a certified equine therapist, so I do equine therapy with these kids.
My favorite thing is riding horses. Yeah, horses. Riding horses.
Every activity at the Academy is designed to equip students with a Christ-centered view of themselves and their world.
I feel like I can really express myself more here and not be afraid to be who I am, because no one's going to make fun of me for something that I wear or how I talk.
I like this school more because nobody beats mean to me, you know.
Whenever I was in public school, I was bullied a lot, and it just wasn't right. And then when you come here, they won't make fun of you. They'll just either laugh with you, or whenever you're hurting, they'll cry with you. It's amazing.
It's nice here.
The Academy is a really nice place to learn about God and Jesus, and I've actually learned a lot more
and I used to think sin was all right.
I'm from a public school, so this is a really big change for me from coming from a public school that has nothing to do with God and influences and gossip and drugs and fighting to a wholesome-based Christian school where there's no fighting, no drugs, none of that.
We kind of operate like a family, so if there's something said or done that wasn't right, it can be fixed there and then, and it doesn't carry on.
I get to see a miracle every day. It's amazing to watch these kids come in here. Some of them have been bullied. Some of them don't feel real good about themselves because they don't make good grades. And it's just amazing to watch them start to flourish and watch their little faces that maybe were hard and a little withdrawn. All of a sudden they start to soften. And all of a sudden they're smiling and they're laughing and they're having a good time because they're accepted for who they are. There is no bullying going on at the Academy.
The Academy is completely free for students and depends entirely upon charitable gifts. Those who partner through prayer and financial giving are making an eternal impact on the lives of these precious children.
When I grow up, I want to be a foster parent.
I want to be a veterinarian when I grow up to help animals.
I want to be a biologist and find a cure for cancer and dengue fever.
It's been a miracle for a lot of people here, and I know that some people were begging to come here because they knew it was going to be better for them.
I just stand in awe.
It's been a lot of fun to do this ministry. One story that's pretty interesting. We had a little boy that just couldn't seem to remember the sounds of his letters, and we'd work on him and work on him and work on him. And he lives with an aunt, a grandmother, and a mother, and so there's no men in his life. So whenever I go to the school to be there, I'm on the board of directors, and I'm also kind of the principal, the heavy. He sees me, and we just became instant buddies. I'm like his father figure, and so he's in my arms every time I go there. Even if I was to go tomorrow, and I'm going on Tuesday, he'll be the first one to greet me. I mean, he just latched onto me. So and I've tried to help him in seeing how important it is to learn the sounds and learn and to advance in his education. So there's this other girl that's in there, and she's about 13 years old. She has a very rough background that she's come from. She would not give me any eye contact. She would never speak to me. She would never look at me in the eyes, ever. I mean, and whenever I would have to ask questions about different things because of part of my job, she would give me quick one-word answers and make sure that her hair was covering most of her eyes. Just, you don't have to be a psychiatrist to know a little bit about what that's all about. So 3 months into the school year, we were about to have a break, and I'm holding Landon, the little boy, and I said, now Landon, we come walking back in the school, we've been outside, and I said, what's that letter on the board Miss Morse put up there? And he looks at it and studies it for a moment, and he goes, aw. I went, R. That's fantastic. And so, I mean, he got the letter right. And believe me, I know that doesn't sound like much, but he remembered something. And then my wife was telling me, but for the last 4 weeks, she started doing mentoring, where the older students help the younger students with shapes and letters and sounds and colors and things that they can help them with. So she was allowing them to help, and so for 1 hour a day, these older kids were helping the younger kids. And so I noticed a complete difference in the younger kids. They felt so attached. I mean, here's these younger kids having an older student pay attention to them for an hour a day. Imagine what that did for their self-esteem and their feeling of value. But what it did for the older kids, I had no idea. So here I am holding Landon, and he said, that's an awe. And I went, that is awesome. So I start dancing with him and trying to be excited about a small success. And so then I feel this tapping on my elbow, and I look around, and here's that girl that's never given me eye contact, that's never spoken to me. And she's looking at me, and she's smiling. And she says, I taught him that. So it's miracles like that and we had 5 come to faith in Christ last year. 5 of these older students came to faith. Baptized them there on the pond that's at the Cowboy Ranch. Pretty cool thing. I want to talk to you, though, about how to make a global impact. How to make a global impact. Now, let me tell you, if you want to make a global impact, and if you try to make a global impact, you probably never will, because that's not how it works. But I want to show you the ingredients that's necessary for someone to be able to make a global impact, and it's taken from the book of Genesis. If you turn to Genesis, we're going to start looking at chapter 37. Does anybody know who's got more airtime in the book of Genesis than anybody else? Who's talked about more in Genesis than anybody else? And I'm not talking about God. I'm talking about an individual, a person. This is the book of patriarchs. Moses, I would have thought that, maybe, but no. Who else? Abraham, you'd think. Abraham. Joseph. Of all people, Joseph. He gets chapter 37, and then he doesn't get chapter 38, but 39 through 50 are all about him. So he gets more airtime than Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He gets more airtime than Adam. And so this guy gets more attention than anybody else in the book of Genesis. And I think he's got a lot to share. I think he has a lot to tell us because this man made a global impact. Let's take a look at his story and his life and how that came about. 3 things I'm going to do. I'm going to show you some key principles. I'm going to show you first some key points, 3 of them. Then I'm going to show you 2 key principles that I think are the ones we need to focus on that we can do something about. And then I want to show you a key proof that shows if we've got it down, okay? So let's do that together. I'm going to first of all look at the key points. I want you to see that he started out with what I would call family woes. Family woes. If you look at chapter 37, you see in verses 2 through 5, it says, this is the history of Jacob, Joseph being 17 years old. How old was he? 17. Anybody 17? Raise your hand if you're 17. Anybody? Yes. We got a 17-year-old over here. This is your age. Joseph is your age. All right? Now look what happens. It says that he's 17, was feeding the flock with his brothers, and the lad was with the sons of Bilhah, the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and Joseph brought a bad report to them about his brothers, to his father. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all the other children because he was the son of his old age. Also he made him a tunic of many colors. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all of his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. Here is the 11th of 12 kids, one of the youngest of the kids, born to a favorite wife. All the other brothers, the 11, know, because kids know if you have favoritism. You don't have to you don't have to worry if they understand. They know, they get it. So here's this one kid that is getting all the attention. He's got this coat of many colors. And so he does what all older kids love. You got any firstborns in here? Raise your hand if you're a firstborn. Raise your hand, let me see. Man, would y'all look around? Keep your hands up. That's almost half your church. Firstborns. It's unbelievable. All right, so don't you firstborns, now those of you that have, don't you love it when little brother, little sister would come up and give a bad report to you, to your parents? Isn't that an awesome experience? Don't you just love that? That's just something you're like, live for, right? No. So, I mean, this didn't bode well. And so then, of course, as you know the story, Joseph has this dream. And the dream shows that basically all of his brothers are going to one day come and bow down to him. That's just another great thing. And he tells them, oh, by the way, I had this dream. Oh, my goodness. Well, let's just look at some of the words. It says in verse 4, they hated him. And then after he had this dream, it says they hated him. Verse 5, they hated him even more. Look at verse 8. Verse 8 says that they hated him even more for his dream. So what do you get about their family vibe? What do you think's going on in the family here? Is it kind of a loving, respectful, tender, a place you'd want to grow up? Amen? Everybody, right? Look at some more words. Look at verse 18. When they saw him coming, he was coming to find them and check on him for his dad. When they see him afar off, even before he came near, verse 18 says they conspired against him to kill him. Wow. Yeah, I think we might want to call this a dysfunctional family. Amen? I mean, don't you see that in there? I actually believe that Adam and Eve was the first dysfunctional family, and there hadn't been a functional one ever since. But still, this one's definitely got some issues. Wanting to kill him. And they said, now let's take and kill him. And then Reuben says, no, we better not. But what they did do is found in verse 27. Look what they do. Verse 27 says, come, let us what? Sell him. Now, you know why they did that? Because they're Jews. Kill our brother? Let's make money off of him. I mean, I'm just saying. And by the way, my Messianic church thought that was funny. So you are allowed to laugh. So they sold him to some Midianite, basically, can I tell you, they're Ishmaelites. Anybody know the story of Ishmael and Isaac? All of a sudden, it's like, oh my goodness, they were at war, and they still are today. They're at war with each other. This is incredible. They sell him to Ishmael. Well, then they take and it gets worse. So the first thing I want you to see is that he had some family woes. The second thing I want you to see is the Lord's location through all this, because it mentions it several times. The Lord's location. Yeah, first of all, I bet that in this audience there are some of you that could match possibly some of what Joseph experienced. You've had some pretty rough woes in your family too. I mean, I'm just assuming in a crowd this large, not everybody's had perfect homes. My dad was an alcoholic. He was a World War II veteran, and he went to the Korea War, and so he was gone an awful lot. And then I was the baby of 5 kids, and by the time I came along, some of that experience that was in his head still had messed up that head, and so the only thing he could find comfort in was in a bottle. And so my dad was drunk pretty much 6 days a week. He never drank on Sunday. I know that's bizarre, but he just didn't. Never went to church, but he never drank on Sunday. But he did every other day of the week, and he was pretty much toast every night. So I grew up with that. And I can tell you, I had some interesting experiences. You know, my dad, because of drinking, he would say and do things that was totally inappropriate for a father to do, and would hurt deeply. So, you know, and all of us probably have similar stories that we can tell about family woes of a brother not liking us, a sister, whatever. Well, the neat thing, let me finish the story. My dad, after my mom died, he tried to just drink himself to death, and woke up one morning after drinking. He called me on the phone. He said, come to my house and share with me how I can know Christ. So I drove from where I was working to my dad's home, shared Christ with my dad. My dad accepted the Lord, and then I said, all right, let's find all your liquor and pour it down, because you're not going to do that anymore. And so I went and found all of his hard liquor, and we poured it down. He had a lot. He had it hidden everywhere. Living in the house by himself, he still hides his liquor. So we found it, poured it down. I said, don't do that again, Dad. That's the last you do that. He goes, I won't. Well, I drove out of his driveway, and I said to myself, that'll last 2 weeks. About 2 months later, they'd given him a key to the church where he was visiting, and said, since you're here before everybody else, would you turn the heat on in the morning, or the air conditioning, and turn all the lights on for us? He became a gatekeeper at a little church. And he said it was the greatest thing that could ever been done. My dad read the scriptures all the time. The main joy I had from that was that when he got baptized, the pastor asked if I would like to baptize my dad. And you know how cool that is? Baptize your own father. So I got to say, I baptize you, my father, and now my brother, in the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, and baptized my dad. And then a couple years later, I got to baptize my mother-in-law, which was another miracle, as my wife and I led her to faith in Christ while we were missionaries in Indonesia. On the phone, we led her to faith. And then I came home, I baptized her, and the miracle there is that I brought her back up. Anyway, so here is the next point I want to make, and that's the Lord's location. Look, and this is a key. This is a key. Look at this. Chapter 39. Look in your Bibles, chapter 39, or your phones, whatever you got. Chapter 39, verse 2. What does it say? It says, here's the location of the Lord. Where's the Lord's location? Where is it? The Lord was with Joseph. Now, can I ask what's so big about that? And the second passage that's there, verse 21. Look at verse 21. What does it say about him there? What's it say? Then the Lord was with Joseph. So you've got the Lord's location here. He was where? With Joseph. And I know you're going, hey, preach. Duh. He's with us. And he is. He's with every one of us. The Lord's with us. The difference is not where he is, but how aware are you of where he is? You see, that's the difference. Yeah, the Lord's with us. I know that. Do you know that when you're alone and you've got a computer in front of you? Do you know the Lord is with us? Do you know that the Lord is with you when you are on the road and this woman is going 35 and a 55? Like I experienced this morning on the way here. Third thing I want you to see that's a key point is he was in an unfair world. The verses that are up there, chapter 37, verse 28, shows you that his brothers sold him. The next one, verse 36, shows that those Midianites sold him to an Egyptian guy named Potiphar. Actually a position, not a name, but anyway. And then chapter 39, verse 20, shows us that he was thrown in jail for falsely being accused of sexual advances on a woman he did not do. And then the next one shows that he was in that jail for an extra 2 years, even after he had been there a while and interpreted 2 different men's dreams. I'm just wanting you to see that Joseph did not have a fair world. He was not treated with privilege. He had a rough go. So, I'm sure that you've got stories you could tell. If you were to be up here and be able to give maybe a similar thing about how unfair your world and the way things have been for you, you could give a similar story. I guarantee you could. Many of you could give worse stories about unfairness in your world. I don't doubt that. So that's the key points I want you to see about a man that made a global difference, made a global impact. So let's look at the 2 things that make the difference. And what are those? There's 2 points I want you to see that are just critical, key principles. The first one is that Joseph had a God consciousness. Remember, I asked where was the Lord's location? He was with Joseph. See, the difference was Joseph knew it. He had a God consciousness. Now, how do I know that? Well, what is it that gives me the evidence to say that? Look at chapter 39 and look at it very closely. This woman, Potiphar, Potiphar was a man of great status, very wealthy. And his wife comes on to Joseph because he's young and he's attractive. And so kind of a scary situation. I mean, if Potiphar was a man of influence and power and prestige, his wife was more than likely an attractive woman. So she comes to him and she says, come lie with me, verse 7. In verse 8, he refuses and goes and says to his master's wife, look, my master does not even know what's with me in his house. He's committed all that he has into my hand. There's no one greater in this house than I, nor has he kept back anything from me but you. And then he says, he's committed everything into my hand. And then he says, you're his wife. How can I do? Look at verse 9. How can I do this great wickedness and offend my master, your husband? Is that what it says? No, it does not say that. What? The sin was not against, and it would have been against her husband, yes. But the sin, in his eyes, was not against her husband, his master. It wasn't about him losing his job. The sin was against God because that's a God consciousness. I don't sin so that I might have more blessings from God. I sin because I don't want to violate his trust in me when he watches me every single day. How do we, when we're in school, those of us that are in school, students, when you're doing your work and your teacher walks up and she's right behind you, how's your posture? I know it is, and we change. Look, I'm teaching adjunct at Shorter University. I teach junk, obviously. So anyway, so I'm teaching there, and sometimes I'll kind of just, kind of walk around, and all of a sudden they get stiffer, and they sit, and their posture's better, and they're so like paying attention. It's like funny. That's like, look, that faked off your high school teachers. I'm not falling for it, okay? I mean, I've been around the block a few times, and I'm not falling for it. But I want you to realize it's that concept of knowing that there are eyes of authority over you and on you. That's what I'm talking about. God's eyes are where? In every place. So, yes, the location of God was he was with Joseph, but the main thing I want you to realize is God wasn't the issue at this point. It was that Joseph realized God's position. And that's what I'm wanting you to know. That's something you can take care of. That's something you're responsible for. Listen, look at me. You and I need to have a God consciousness, especially in the world we are in today. So, principle number 1 is God consciousness. How can I sin against God? And the second thing I want you to see is not only a God consciousness, but a good conscience. It's hard to say both of those words. Does anybody else in English have trouble with that? Conscience and conscience. Anyway. You want to have a good conscience. How is it that I'm talking about having a good conscience with Joseph? Because there's 2 aspects of a good conscience. One is if we've done something wrong, we've gone to someone and we've made it right. We've asked for forgiveness. We've tried to restore whatever it was that we did that hurt. That's having a good conscience. But there's another aspect of good conscience. That's when someone wrongs you, you release them from the guilt of it. You forgive them, and we always say this, and it's a joke, I think, but we say, well, I'll forgive, but I can't forget. You know what you did? You didn't forgive. So that's a part of your conscience. And let me tell you something. Many of us in this room right now are operating poorly because we do not have a good conscience. Our conscience is hindering us from doing mighty things for God. Because in some ways, you still see yourself as poor, as weak, as frail, as not useful, as you still see yourself in that light. And sometimes it's things that you've done that you've not cleared up, and it's also things that's been done to you that you've not released. There's a woman that wrote a book and used to be on stage years ago, Corrie ten Boom. She was an amazing, godly woman who helped the Jews. Her dad had a watch factory. I've been to that factory and seen that in Holland, in Haarlem, and it was an amazing story. She was abused by Nazi guards. One in particular abused her repeatedly over and over, and so when the war was over and she was on the speaker circuit and she'd go around and speak, there were people lining up to shake her hand. And she looked, and about 5 people back was this man that had abused her. And he was in line to come up and shake her hand. And all of a sudden, all the memories of that event swelled up within her. She tells the story that as soon as he came up and she saw the tears in his eyes, and all he could say was, "Can you forgive me?" She says that she realized that the person that was set free at that moment was not him, but her. A lot of times our bitterness, our resentment, our hurt, it hinders a good conscience. So let's take a look at what I mean by that. We all know the story. Joseph had the dream he was going to have his brothers, even his father and mother, bow down to him. And sure enough, all that happened because he was placed in second of command over all of Egypt. There was the dreams that the Pharaoh had. He gave the right interpretation. For 7 years, you're going to have a superabundance, and then for 7 years, you're going to have the worst drought and famine ever. And so you need to store up. And all the nations of the world were impacted by this man named Joseph. It was a global impact. He was placed in position. And so when he got in this position, Pharaoh gave him a wife. And it actually gives her name in chapter 41. If you'll turn there, you'll see what I mean. Her name is Potiphar, the daughter of Potiphar, verse 50. Joseph was born two sons before the years of the famine came. Asenath is her name, Asenath, and her father was Potiphar. So it shows that it was an Egyptian wife. Now, I need you to know something about Jews. When they name their children, it's not just random. They are serious about the names. The names mean something. My mom picked my name. We didn't know until after my mom died that it was one of her old boyfriends. My dad wouldn't have liked that if he'd have known that. But anyway, I thought that's kind of funny. But my name means cheerful. And my wife loves that because she feels like that really does describe me. I'm usually pretty up. And so I'm pretty cheerful. So she likes that. But names mean something. You know, we have a daughter named Hannah, and her name means full of grace. And she really is a very gracious child. So our name, we have a daughter named Mary, and Mary is where you get myrrh, and that sounds like, why did you name your daughter bitter? But what the reason we named Mary that was because the thing about Mary is when Mary's broken, it emits the greatest fragrance that can even cover the smell of death. But it requires a brokenness. And my daughter, whenever she's gone through brokenness, what comes out of her is such a beautiful picture of Christ. So names mean something to the Jews. I'm just telling you, he didn't just pick a name out of a hat. Look at verse 51. 41:51 says, Joseph called the name of his firstborn, what? Manasseh. You know what Manasseh means in Hebrew? It's a phrase that means cause me to forget. You'd think that the name would be something like cause me to forgive. But it doesn't mean that. It means cause me to what? Forget. And notice what it says after that, what Joseph says. It says, for God has made me forget all my toil and all my father's house. I know that you've got some history in your past. I know you've got some hurt. I do too. But I need you to know something. You holding on to that, it is going to hinder you from being able to do something future. And it will keep you from making an impact in the world that we're living in. What you want to do is you want to forget about it. That's point one, forget about it. That's Manasseh. Manasseh means let's forget about it. And did he ever? The second son that he had born to him by this girl Asenath, the second one, it says in the name of the second, verse 52, the name of the second he called Ephraim. Say Ephraim. You just said a word that means to be fruitful in affliction. As a matter of fact, in some ancient dictionaries, Ephraim is also a word for manure. Well, what makes grass and plants, roses, healthier, produce more? Would y'all answer my question? Manure. Ephraim does. And you know, some of y'all have had some stuff dumped on you. You've experienced Ephraim. And what it's done is it's created character in you. If it had been, listen, I'm going to tell you, I've never had it as a pastor when people come in and talking about moments that changed their life. It's never been when they were sitting on a beach, sipping a drink with an umbrella in it with their toes in the sand. The moment that changed their life was some horrific thing. It was some awful experience. It was an Ephraim. And it changed them on the inside. And so, not only do you forget about it, but you make use of it. You grow from it. You build off of it. Now, let me tell you, don't let your sorrows, don't let the hurts or whatever abuses in your life, don't let that define you, but let it shape you. But do not let it define you. Nobody wants to, every time you come up to hear that same story about how you were, that means it defines you. And do us all a favor. And don't do that. You and I, in our sorrows, in our struggles, in our abuses, and the things where people have hurt us, you and I need to have two things. We need to have a Manasseh and an Ephraim, where we say, you know what? Forget about it. I am moving this. I'm not just going to forget them, I'm forgetting it. And then not only that, I'm going to build off of what was done. I'm going to let that shape me to be more courteous, more thoughtful, more tender, so that I might be able to be a blessing in someone else's life who may have gone through something similar. All right, that's the key principle, the key proof. This has to do with your perspective and your attitude and your actions, and this is really what defines whether or not you get it. And that's what happened with Joseph in chapter 50, verse 19 and 20. You see, first of all, his brothers thought, he is going to kill us. When they discovered who he was, they didn't even know who he was. Read the story sometime. It is fascinating. They didn't even recognize their brother. He kept telling them, it's not enough. You need to go get your youngest brother. They're like, no. And then we come in, Dad was like, no way, Jose, you're not doing that. Or no way, Reuben. Because Jose was not one of the 12 tribes. Anyway, so he was like, you're not doing this. So they did, and they come back, and so they're saying, he's going to kill us. He's going to kill us. Look at the reassurance that he gives them. Remember I told you, you know why they didn't need to worry? Because he had a Manasseh and an Ephraim. And here's the proof. Here's the proof of those two sons and the names he gave those two sons. Here's the proof. Verse 19, Joseph said to them, do not be afraid. For am I in the place of God? He went to the sovereignty of Almighty God that allowed that experience, that allowed that event, and that not only allowed it, but used it. Keep reading. Verse 20 rather. But as for you, you meant evil against me. And did they? Did they? How many times did I read the word hate in chapter 37? They hated him. They hated him more. They hated him even more. They hated him even more. They envied him. They wanted to kill him. On and on. And then they thought, hey, let's make money. They sold him. And came back with this ridiculous story of their dad. It broke his heart. That's the thing about sin. It doesn't just affect a few people. It usually affects the people you like the most. Anyway, so it says, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good, in order to bring it about as it is this day, to save many people alive. Now, therefore, do not be afraid. I will provide for you, your little ones. And he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. And he had all the right to say, you guys, the way you treated me, turnabout's fair play. You're going to sow. You're going to reap what you've sown right now. Come on, how many of us have used these words or at least thought it? And here's the proof that he had a Manasseh and an Ephraim. He turns to the brothers that tried to kill him, that hated him, that envied him, and he said, I'm going to take care of everything you need. I'm going to provide for you in ways that you would have never been provided for. You are not going to suffer. And he loved on those who hurt him. Is that easy to do? I think when you do those two principles, it's not that it's easy, it just becomes natural. Number one, a God consciousness. And number two, a good conscience. If you have those two things, I got news for you. You won't have to try to make a global impact. You just will.